Good morning, students. In the today's session, we'll start with our fifth unit. In this, the first topic starts with domain name system. Where do we use this domain name system, especially for the IP address as well as with the email system? Now, this domain name system is a supporting program that is used by the programmer, such as email and also the IP. Okay, and this domain name system, DNS, is a name which is for the email address or a website name to an IP address or an IP address to a name. Now, when we are working with the domain name system, mainly we can say it is a supporting program which is used by the program such as email. Now, here we have this domain name system client and server program, which is mainly used to help the email program to find the IP address of an email recipient. In this, here we have the simple mail transfer protocol, as we can say SMTP client, which is going to send a request to the DNS client for the proper email ID. Now, in the next step, we are going to learn about what is meant by this domain name system. A user of an email program knows the email address of the recipient, but the IP address needs the IP. Now, whenever you are working with the IP protocol, we need the IP address. And whenever if you want to work with only email, we need the email address. Now, a simple thing, logic, we can know that whenever for the email program, we should have the email address. For the IP protocol, we should have the IP address. Now, this domain name system client program, it is going to send a request to the DNS server to map the email address to the corresponding IP address. Now, to identify an entity TCP/IP protocols, it uses the IP address, which is uniquely identifies the connection of a host to the internet. This DNS, which is mainly designed for the purpose of mapping name to the address as well as address to the name. This is the main theme for the domain name system. Now, here, when we are working with the domain name system, we should learn about what is the distribution of this name system. The information which is contained in the domain namespace, it must be stored and distributed among different computers as well as in different places. This distribution of the information among many computers is called DNS servers, and space which is divided into many domains based on the first level. The root stand alone and create a many domains. A domain may itself divide into subdomains. Now, each server can be authoritative for either a large or a small domain. Now, when we are working with this domain name system, we should learn about what is meant by this zone, where we should use this zone. Okay. Now, zone means what? It is a contagious program. Okay. Contagious part of the entire tree, and it defines what a server is responsible or server has authority. Now, in this, we should learn about two cases. One is the when domain is same as zone, when domain and zone are different. Here, if domain and zone both are same, if a server accepts responsibility for a domain and does not divide the domain into smaller domains, okay? Because if the domain and zone are same, then the transmission will be same. But if the domain and zone are different, then what we have to do? If a server divides its domain into subdomains and delegates part of its authority to other servers, then domain and zone refers to different things. We now learned about whether the domain and zone, if it is the same in one case and if it is a different in another case. Now we'll learn about what is meant by a root server. This root server is a server whose zone consisting of whole. A root server usually does not store any information about domains, but it is going to have the authority to other servers, keeping references to those servers. Now, in this domain name system, we have two types of servers. One is a primary server, another one is a secondary server. What is meant by this primary server? It is a server that stores a file about the zone for which it is have an authority. What is meant by this secondary server? It is a server that transfers the complete information about a zone from another server. And it is going to store the file on its local disk These secondary servers are used for crash recovery mainly. Now, what is meant by this zone transfer? When the secondary server downloads information from the primary server is called zone server. Here we have learned about what is meant by a primary server, what is meant by a secondary server. But what is meant by this zone server? If there is a transmission of data, when the secondary server downloads the information from the primary server, then it is called as a zone server. Now, what is meant by this result? For where do we have this resolver? This we should learn about in the name address resolution. Mapping a name to an address or address to a name is called as name address resolution. In this, we should learn about what is meant by this resolver. This domain name system is mainly designed as a client-server application. A host that needs to map an address to a name or a name to an address is called resolver. We have two different types of resolution. Where do we learn this resolution? If we have a mapping a name to an address or address to a name is called as name address resolution. In this resolution, we have two types of resolution. One is a recursive resolution, another one is an iterative resolution. Here in the recursive resolution, we have a continuous way, like client to this particular site, another site, okay, then to the root server, then .com, then like this. But whenever if we have iterative from client to here, each and everywhere for each and every server, the client is having the direct communication, okay. But when we have this recursive resolution, we do not have any direct communication. What is mean by this recursive resolution? A client or resolver can ask for a resultant recursive answer from the name server. If a server is having the authority for the domain name, it can check for the database to respond. And if a server is not the authority, it sends the request to another server, the parent, and waits for the response. If the parent is authority, it replies. Otherwise, it sends a query to yet another server. When the query is finally resolved, the response travels back until it finally reaches the requesting client. Here, what is happened? You just see in the previous slide. Here in the recursive server, the client is asking for a request. Once the client got the answer, then the client gets back the reply. That means here, like when the query is finally resolved, the response travels back until it reaches the requesting client. This process is called as a recursive resolution. Now, what is mean by this iterative resolution? In this iterative resolution, the client repeats the same query to multiple servers. Here, the client repeats the same query to multiple servers. The client here, just see if the server is an authority. It's the authority for the name. It sends the answer. If the server is not an authority, it returns the IP address of the server to the client that the server thinks can resolve the query. Now, the client is mainly responsible for repeating the query to this second server. If that server can resolve the problem, it answers the query with the IP address. Otherwise, it returns the IP address of a new server to the client. This process is called the iterative resolution. You can see in the previous diagram, here we have a recursive resolution, then we have the iterative resolution. Now in the iterative resolution, it is going to give the request and reply. For each and every server, it is going to give. In the recursive, direct communication we have. Now, here what is mean by this caching? When a server asks for a mapping from another server, it is going to receive the reply, okay? And it stores this information in its cache memory before sending it to the client. If the client asks for the same message, it can check its cache memory and returns the result. Here, we'll see in the next session.